In world history, there are four major civilizations considered the cradles of the modern world: China, Egypt, India, and Mesopotamia. Among these, Mesopotamia is often regarded as one of the oldest civilizations, on par with Egypt. So, what makes this civilization so interesting? Let us explore it in the following article. Unlike China or Rome, which started as small ethnic groups that gradually assimilated those around them, Mesopotamia was a land inhabited by many different ethnic groups. There were periods when one ethnic group rose to power, only to gradually decline and be replaced by another. However, the cultures of these individual ethnic groups shared many similarities in customs, traditions, and legends. Prominent among them was the Sumerian civilization, a collection of city-states along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Akkad. One of the oldest empires in human history, the city-state of Babylon, and the famously brutal Assyrian Empire. True to its name, Mesopotamia is the land situated between two major rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. The north of Mesopotamia is an arid desert, while the south is a vast swampland. This peculiar geography led ancient people to call this region Buran, meaning a great flood. A distinction is often made between Upper Mesopotamia in the north and Lower Mesopotamia in the south. Upper Mesopotamia is the area between the Euphrates and the Tigris, extending from the headwaters down to Baghdad. Lower Mesopotamia is the area from Baghdad to the Persian Gulf, encompassing Kuwait and part of western Iran. An interesting aspect is that Mesopotamia lacked abundant metal resources, making agricultural products the primary trade goods. Consequently, the climate had a profound impact on the daily lives of the inhabitants. In Mesopotamian mythology, many crucial deities were associated with natural phenomena such as wind, rain, and storms such as the supreme god Enlil, a storm god who once sought to destroy humanity simply because he found them annoying. This reflects the unpredictable and dangerous nature of Mesopotamia's environment. Furthermore, the flat terrain with few mountains or natural barriers made Mesopotamia highly susceptible to invasions by nomadic tribes. Consequently, the history of this land was marked by frequent upheavals. Mesopotamia was a fertile land. Here, people favored cultivating grapes, olives, barley, and various other fruits. The hot, humid climate and abundant food supply provided favorable conditions for the population's livelihood. From May to October, the rising river waters deposited fertile silt, but also caused floods and droughts. Despite this, many people flocked here to settle, turning Mesopotamia into a melting pot of diverse ethnic groups. Mesopotamian society was divided into 6 main social classes. At the top was the king, followed by priests and scholars patronized by the king. Below them were merchants, artisans, and farmers. The lowest class consisted of slaves, who were typically prisoners of war. During the early periods of the Sumerian civilization and the Akkadian Empire, agriculture served as the primary economic foundation. People constructed complex irrigation systems to support crop cultivation and fruit orchards. In addition, they raised various livestock, including sheep, cattle, donkeys, and poultry like ducks and geese, as well as engaged in fishing. Families in Mesopotamian society were generally patriarchal and polygamous, but all children, not just the eldest son, had the right to inherit property. Although free farmers remained the largest group, a slave class gradually formed and constituted a significant portion of society. Initially, Mesopotamian women enjoyed many rights. but society gradually became more patriarchal. Councils of elders, which had included both men and women, were replaced by a centralized monarchy centered on the king. Nevertheless, women retained the right to own property and could obtain a divorce if they had a legitimate reason. By the Babylonian period, the Mesopotamian economy grew much stronger. Agriculture remained the pillar, but trade began to operate on a larger scale. Agricultural products were exchanged with foreign lands via sea and land routes, bringing back metals such as copper and iron. Handicrafts also achieved a high level of development, characterized by grand architectural structures, palaces, tombs, jewelry, textiles, and shipbuilding. During the Assyrian period, the economy did not develop as robustly due to challenging natural conditions. The Assyrians focused on animal husbandry, hunting, and logging or stone quarrying. After expanding their territory, they utilized wealth plundered from occupied regions to build temples and major public works. Under Assyrian rule, subjects of the empire or foreigners had opportunities to attain high positions in the administration. However, the primary social structure remained centered around families and tribes living around their own cultivated and grazing lands. Education in Mesopotamia was reserved exclusively for the children of the wealthy, government officials, buni, and temple administrators. Children typically learned trades from their parents. For instance, merchants' children learned trade, while farmers' children learned agriculture from an early age. Girls, on the other hand, usually stayed at home to cook and manage the household. Mesopotamian citizens enjoyed various recreational activities, such as boxing, wrestling, and popular board games, the most famous of which was the Royal Game of Ur, one of the oldest board games in the world. Among the most notable achievements of the Mesopotamian civilization, astronomy stands out. During the Babylonian period, Mesopotamian thinkers conceived of a cosmic model and identified 5 other planets in the solar system: Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. They were able to calculate solar and lunar eclipses in advance and established a lunar calendar, which was later refined into a lunisolar calendar, subsequently leading to the development of astrology and divination. Mesopotamians also made significant advances in medicine, with their most developed branch likely being anatomy, though it remained heavily influenced by religion. Mathematics was another area of significant advancement. Mesopotamians played a pioneering role in mathematics, being the first to discover the sexagesimal base 6-0 numerical system, calculate circumferences, and determine the value of pi. They developed a positional numeral system and fundamental arithmetic operations, and even discovered how to calculate right-angled triangles long before Pythagoras. For centuries, the people of Mesopotamia were also ahead of their time in methods of distillation, candle and glass making, metallurgy, and controlling river flows. These heritages were later inherited by subsequent civilizations, such as Greece and Persia. Mesopotamia, along with Egypt, was one of the first civilizations to comprehensively develop art. One of their most outstanding achievements is the Ishtar Gate in Babylon. This double gate featured walls decorated with blue glazed bricks, standing up to 15 meters high with foundations reaching 14 meters deep. Today, the Ishtar Gate remains one of the most impressive physical remnants of the Babylonian civilization. Mesopotamian art is also represented through clay tablet works, although many pieces have been destroyed by time. Some have survived, such as the Gweno lioness, a sculpture combining female and lion forms dating back thousands of years. Mesopotamian sculptures often focused on male figures, frequently kings, characterized by long beards and large eyes. Relief art was also highly popular, used to decorate stone stelas, votive offerings, and victory monuments. Under the Assyrians, large-scale works of art were constructed, depicting in detail scenes of war, hunting, and colossal guardian statues. The Mesopotamians were also the first in the world to practice systematic urban planning. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the city of Uruk is described as a magnificent and prosperous place with gardens, markets, temples, and colossal city walls. The primary building materials were reeds, teen, stone, wood, brick, and mud. For grand structures like palaces, they also used precious stones and decorative bricks for religious purposes. A unique architectural achievement of the Mesopotamians was the ziggurat-tiered tower temples resembling Egyptian pyramids. The Mesopotamians believed that gods lived atop the ziggurats, so only priests and individuals with power were permitted to ascend them. Ziggurats served not only as places of worship, but also as symbols of power and the connection between humanity and the divine. The earliest known language of Mesopotamia was Sumerian, followed by Akkadian, both representing the region's most prominent ethnic groups. During the reign of the Akkadian Empire, the Akkadian language was widely spoken, but Sumerian remained preferred in administration, literature, and religious affairs. The Sumerian language used cuneiform script, written with wedge-shaped styluses pressed into wet clay. It was not until the reign of King Sargon that syllabic writing became widely used, increasing the literate population. Another crucial achievement of Mesopotamian culture is the Code of Hammurabi, consisting of 282 laws. This is considered one of the oldest legal codes in the world. Carved on a basalt stele over 2 meters tall, with a base diameter of nearly 2 meters. The front of the stele depicts the sun god, handing the laws to King Hammurabi in a solemn posture. This stele was discovered in 1902 and is preserved to this day in the Louvre Museum in France. Mesopotamian legends held that the world was a flat disk surrounded by a vast body of water, and above all lay heaven. They also believed that water enveloped the entire world, and the universe was born from these waters. Like many mythologies, theirs had numerous variations and contradictions due to religious shifts over time. Nevertheless, across the 4 major cultures that dominated Mesopotamia, certain commonalities persisted. Among these, the 3 most famous creation myths include the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, and the Eridu Genesis. The Enuma Elish is a Babylonian creation myth describing the formation of the world, beginning with the deities Apsu and Tiamat. Tiamat and Apsu mated, and from them arose a series of entities known as the Igigi. Among the Igigi, the 2 most powerful deities were Lamu and Lahamu, who, like their parents, mated to give birth to Anshar and Kishar. Anshar and Kishar followed in their parents' footsteps and gave birth to Anu, who was the grandfather of Ea. The descendants of Anshar and Kishar were called the Anunnaki, the bloodline of An. After some time, Apsu found his descendants too noisy and planned to kill his children and grandchildren. However, Tiamat quickly warned Ea. In response, Ea killed Apsu and used his ancestor's body to build a home for himself and his family. Inside Apsu's body, Ea's son, the god Marduk, was born. Meanwhile, after Apsu's death, Tiamat sought to confront the gods. She married her son Kingu and gave him the Tablet of Destinies. thereby recognizing Kingu as the supreme deity. Recognizing the critical danger, Anshar, who was then the leader of his descendants, bestowed power upon Marduk, while Lamu and Lahamu declared Marduk king of the world. With his power, Marduk overcame his fear, slew Tiamat, seized the Tablet of Destinies from Kingu, and declared himself the supreme deity of the universe. From Tiamat's corpse, he created the heavens and the earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars, as well as the Tigris and Euphrates rivers from Tiamat's eyes, while Apsu's body became the underworld. Marduk then handed the Tablet of Destinies to Anshar, as agreed, and Anshar accepted it, recognizing Marduk's sovereignty. Finally, Marduk created Babylon as the home of the gods. The god Ea subsequently created humans from Kingu's blood. Once everything was complete, Marduk was crowned king and ruled the world from the capital of Babylon. The Atrahasis originates from the Akkadian Empire. The story revolves around the eponymous character and the process of the world's creation. The tale begins with the gods, led by Enlil, who possessed the Tablet of Destinies. After exhausting labor to sustain life, they created humans to replace them in their work. However, humans multiplied rapidly, disturbing the gods. Enlil, the supreme god, punished humanity with a great flood. Nevertheless, due to disputes among the gods and assistance from Enki, humans survived, though in exchange, the gods imposed diseases and other disasters to control the population. The Eridu Genesis, also known as the Sumerian creation myth, begins with a monologue by the goddess Ninhursag, who gave birth to humanity. Although the initial parts are missing, we can see that Ninhursag was amazed by humanity's transition from a nomadic lifestyle to building a civilization. Ninhursag began planning to bestow kingship upon humans. However, after that segment, Enlil, the supreme god, submerged all of humanity because he found them too noisy. Fortunately, the god Enki informed a priest named Ziusudra of Enlil's plan. Ziusudra then built several boats to save himself and all other living creatures. As we can see, the Eridu Genesis can be considered one of the world's earliest texts regarding the Great Flood legend, which later influenced the story of Noah in the Bible. The story of Enlil drowning humanity serves as a reminder of the erratic natural conditions of the Mesopotamian land. Beside these three tales, the Mesopotamians had several other creation stories, such as the Sumerian myth describing Namu, the goddess of the primeval sea, who gave birth to An, the sky god, and Ki, the earth god, and created the world. The genealogy of Anu describes Duri and Dari, deities representing eternal time, who created the world, while the genealogy of Enlil mentions the earth deities Enki and Ninki as the creators of the world. The genealogy of Enlil later influenced the genealogy of Anu to create a new version. Mesopotamian mythology features many minor deities, but the most prominent among them is the group of 7 deities who decree fate. They are the 7 most powerful gods within the Anunnaki group Anu: Ishtar, Enlil, Ea, Ninhursag, Nanna, and Shamash. Among them, Nanna is the father of Ishtar and Shamash. He represents the moon and is the patron of the cities of Ur and Haran. However, Nanna was not the leader of the gods. That position belonged to Enlil, the patron god of Nippur, who represented storms, wind, and earth, and served as the ideal model for monarchs. Ea, or Enki, represents creation, knowledge, and magic. He was regarded as the protector of humanity and the world, playing an important role in the Eridu Genesis. Ea was also the patron of the city-state of Eridu. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, he created Enkidu to defeat the hero Gilgamesh, while on another occasion, he created Asushunamir to defeat Ishtar. Tradition holds that Ea had a rivalry with his sister Ninhursag, as both wished to become the third greatest deity after Anu and Enlil. However, some stories depict the two as husband and wife by making Damkina, the name of Ea's wife, a title of Ninhursag. Another interesting point is that Ea also had another counterpart, Enki, whom we mentioned earlier. Although they share names, if Ea is the god of wisdom, Enki is the primordial god of the earth. Ishtar, the goddess representing love, war, and religious power, was worshipped from Sumerian times through the Assyrian period. She was the queen of heaven and the patron deity of the Eanna temple in the city-state of Uruk. Many scholars believe that Ishtar was not originally a Sumerian deity, but was integrated into mythology during the Sumero-Akkadian period. She represents Venus and married Dumuzid, the god representing shepherds, fertility, and the cycle of growth and decay. However, Dumuzid was banished to the underworld each year to take Ishtar's place. Each year, upon his return, Ishtar and Dumuzid would make love to bring life back to the earth once more. The story of Dumuzid explains the seasonal changes in Mesopotamia and may have later inspired the similar story of Persephone in Greek mythology. Beside Ishtar is Shamash, her twin brother and the god of the sun, justice, morality, and truth. He is the pursuer of justice and the protector of travelers, soldiers, merchants, and sailors. He is said to be very close to Ishtar and possesses knowledge of the future and dreams. Through his children, Mamu and Zeke, Shamash sends dreams to forewarn people of the future. Ereshkigal is the goddess of the underworld, referred to as Kur or Irkalla in Mesopotamian mythology. She is Ishtar's sister, although some versions refer to Ereshkigal as another aspect of Ishtar. Ereshkigal became the ruler of the underworld after being abducted and imprisoned there. Later, Kur, her abductor, fought a terrible battle with Enki. Following this battle, Ereshkigal seized the opportunity to become the ruler of the underworld. The most famous story about Ereshkigal is her clash with her sister Ishtar. One day, Ishtar descended to the underworld to gain control over all realms, the underworld, the earth, and heaven. Neti, the gatekeeper of the underworld, followed the queen's orders and forced Ishtar to pass through the 7 gates of the underworld. At each gate, Ishtar had to surrender an item of clothing or jewelry, leaving her with nothing to protect herself. Nevertheless, she was still strong enough to threaten to use the undead to subjugate Ereshkigal. Jealous of Ishtar, Ereshkigal seized the opportunity to bind her sister and hang her corpse on a hook in the underworld. Without Ishtar, the world fell into chaos. The god Ninshubur then consulted Enki to rescue Ishtar by creating a creature and ordering it to carry the water of life down to the underworld. Revitalized by the water of life, Ishtar returned to the living world, reclaimed her belongings, and restored order to the world. In Mesopotamian mythology, Marduk is the son of the water god Enki and the goddess Damkina. He is the patron deity of order, justice, magic, and fairness, as well as storms and agriculture. He is a young and extremely powerful god, recognized as the king of the gods, which is why the Greeks later viewed him as the Mesopotamian equivalent of Zeus. He is also associated with Jupiter, the largest planet known to the Mesopotamians. However, during the reign of Hammurabi, Marduk was not the supreme deity. That position belonged to Enlil. Instead, Marduk was viewed as the mediator between the gods and humanity. Besides seizing kingship and defeating Tiamat, Marduk was also recorded as a deity representing agriculture and fertility. The difference between Marduk, the king of the gods, and Marduk, the local agricultural god, likely stemmed from the growth of his city, Babylon, from a small city-state to a powerful and vast empire. Following the decline of Babylon, Marduk was gradually overshadowed by the Assyrian god Ashur. In works like the Epic of Era, Marduk, who once brought order and stability, is depicted as bringing chaos and being overthrown. Tiamat is a primordial goddess in Mesopotamian mythology, likely originating from the primordial goddess Namu. She is the goddess of salt water who gave birth to the gods. She also gave birth to 11 monsters, led by Kingu, who possessed a half-human, half-dragon appearance, sometimes depicted as a black dragon. Alongside Kingu, Tiamat gave birth to Bazmu, the venomous serpent, Usumgalu, a colossal dragon with 3 horns, a lion's head, 4 legs, and wings, Mushmahu, a 7-headed serpent, Muskushu, a reptile with a snake-like body and tall, cat-like legs, Lamu Atal, hairy man, Ugalu, a lion-headed monster, Urademu, a half-human, half-lion creature, Girtablilu, a half-human, half-scorpion monster, Umudabrutu, a compressed storm, Kululu, a merman, and Kuzariku, a bullman. The story of Tiamat is likely the earliest version of the Chauskampf, or the battle against chaos, revolving around the fight between a hero and a monster from the underworld or the sea, a concept that may have later inspired the battle between Zeus and Typhon in Greek mythology or the creation accounts in the Bible. Her death can be interpreted as the transition of human society from a matriarchal stage to a patriarchal one. In Mesopotamian mythology, the most famous story is undoubtedly the Epic of Gilgamesh. This epic appeared between 2100 BC and 1200 BC and has been preserved to this day. The story begins with lines describing the prosperous city of Uruk under the control of Gilgamesh, a king whose veins carried 2/3 divine blood. In the context of the story, Gilgamesh is considered immature, spending much of his time fighting, wrestling, partying, and engaging in other harmful acts. The gods sent the wild man Enkidu to defeat Gilgamesh. The two fought day and night. However, in the end, they became close friends and spent a great deal of time exploring the world together. They defeated Aga, the king of Kish, killed the bull of heaven, and slew Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest. However, their actions ultimately angered the gods, and Enkidu died of an illness shortly thereafter. Grieved by his friend's death, Gilgamesh became aware of the cruelty of death and set out to find immortality. Ultimately failing, he returned to Uruk. Just as the story opens, Gilgamesh once again describes the prosperous scene of Uruk to the reader. However, the most significant difference this time is that Gilgamesh himself learned a crucial lesson about arrogance and haste. He returned to rule his kingdom justly for over 100 years. Despite being an ancient story, The values of the Epic of Gilgamesh remain highly recognized today. Beside the values of a journey of maturity or warnings about the dangers of tyrants and the abuse of power, the Epic of Gilgamesh stands out by not constructing a flawless heroic model like many subsequent epics. Mesopotamia began forming from small communities living along the rivers stretching from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. Over time, they entered the Neolithic period, which lasted from 6,500 BC to 3,800 BC. During this era, Mesopotamians developed agriculture and culture. Thanks to surplus food production, the inhabitants had the means to develop handicrafts, to establish a tax system, and manage food distribution, leading to the birth of early states. From there, towns and cities began to appear, most notably Uruk, a city with an administrative system of officials and workshops funded by temples. Unlike other cities, Uruk was not ruled by a king but by a priest or a group of priests. This demonstrates the profound influence of cultural and religious life on Mesopotamian citizens. Under the authority of the priests were officials, scholars, and scribes who ensured the smooth operation of society. The lowest class consisted of farmers and fishermen. This period also witnessed the birth of writing, initially used to record taxes and food distribution. From 3,500 BC onward, the influence of the city of Uruk expanded, driving urbanization and the formation of colonies under the control of Uruk, which was now the most powerful force in the region. This era is known as the Uruk period. However, after a period of instability, possibly due to civil war, nomadic incursions, or colonial uprisings, Uruk gradually weakened and gave way to other powers. Centuries after the decline of Uruk, the Sumerians began building their own cities, such as Umma, Eridu, and Nippur. Each city was an independent microstate with its own deities, similar to the city-states of ancient Greece. These city-states concentrated on urban areas and were surrounded by villages that provided food. Agricultural development and the wealth of the land attracted many immigrants, leading to rapid population growth. This put great logistical pressure on the region, resulting in resource wars between the city-states and external forces. This context gradually shifted Mesopotamian society from a primitive democracy to a monarchy, with the appearance of Lugal literally meaning big man, or kings living in palaces. However, religion still held an important role, with each city-state claiming a patron deity, such as Inanna protecting Uruk or Enlil protecting Nippur. The legendary king Gilgamesh likely appeared during this period. During this era, Inshakushanna, a king of Uruk, temporarily unified the Sumerian civilization. However, his rule did not last. After his death, Lugal-Zagezi, a king from Umma, successfully unified Mesopotamia and ruled his vassals from Uruk, the city he conquered and made his new capital. During the reign of Lugal-Zagezi, there was a story that a priestess gave birth to a son and placed the baby in a basket, setting it adrift on the Euphrates River. The child was later adopted by Aki, the gardener for the king of Kish. As he grew up, the child earned the trust of the king of Kish and was appointed to the position of cupbearer. However, the king of Kish later dreamed that he was submerged in a pool of blood and feared that the child would betray him. So he sent the child to Lugal-Zagezi. Ultimately, this child overthrew the king of Kish and became Sargon, the founder of the first empire in human history. The story of Sargon's origin was likely a political message designed to convince the people of Akkad and Sumer that he was an extraordinary ruler of humble origins. Unlike the wealthy rulers of the past, like his subjects, he also came from poverty. From his base in Kish, Sargon conquered the southern region, winning more than 30 battles and subsequently controlling other city-states. He marched his army to Uruk, defeated Lugalzagasi, and continued south to the Persian Gulf. Afterward, he returned north, executed Lugalzagesi, and officially established a new dynasty. Recognizing that he could not expand northward immediately, Sargon focused on expanding his territory eastward and developing trade. By 2300 BC, he conquered Susa, the capital of the Elamites, and expanded his empire from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. This brought stability to trade and the economy while helping Mesopotamia access crucial resources such as copper, cotton, precious stones, silver, ivory, and buffalo from abroad. From Sargon's time onward, subsequent Mesopotamian kings often used foreign goods to project power. Sargon appointed native Akkadians to administrative positions and used religion to convince his subjects that the gods had bestowed the empire upon him rather than him seizing it. He also assigned powerful positions to his relatives, such as his eldest daughter, who was appointed to the position of high priestess. Sargon continued to reign and maintain power until his death in 2279 BC. After 56 years of rule, following Sargon's death, his two sons, Rimush and Manishtushu, spent most of their time suppressing rebellions within the empire. Under Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, the empire not only successfully suppressed revolts, but also defeated the Elamites and subdued many nomadic tribes to consolidate the empire. However, the reign of Naram-Sin also marked the final golden era of the Akkadian Empire. After his death, the empire gradually weakened and ultimately collapsed in 2154 BC. Following the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, the Gutians, once enemies of Akkad, poured into Mesopotamia and established a new dynasty around the valley of the Euphrates River. However, they could not fully control the land. A coalition of Sumerian city-states led by Uruk overthrew the Gutian king and temporarily ruled Mesopotamia for a brief period. Before that, Ur-Nammu, an official from the city of Ur, overthrew Uruk and established a new dynasty later known as the Third Dynasty of Ur-Ur III. Unlike Akkad, this dynasty focused on consolidating and administering the empire rather than continuous territorial expansion. Under the Ur III dynasty, the role of local governors, NC shifted from local representatives to officials under the king's authority. Although there are few records of rebellions during this period, Mesopotamia flourished in trade, irrigation systems, and population. Old cities continued to grow, while new cities gradually became important economic centers, one of which was the city-state of Babylon. However, the dynasty of Ur eventually collapsed in 2004 BC due to drought, disease, and the invasion of the Amorites. To a nomadic group, Mesopotamia fell into chaos among local forces, and the Amorites. Prior to this, the Amorites had repeatedly attacked Mesopotamia, capturing Palestine, Syria, and adjacent regions. Like other nomadic peoples who had arrived here, they gradually integrated into the native community and were assimilated within a few decades. Over time, the Amorites established several city-states, developing the writing systems and language that would form the foundation for the later Babylonian Empire. However, The most powerful city-states during this period were Isin and Larsa. During this period, Shamshi-Adad, a conqueror and military leader, expanded his influence. After years of exile, he returned to his homeland of Ekalatum, defeated the Assyrians, and declared himself king of Assyria. He built a new capital named Shubat-Enlil and appointed his 2 sons to rule other cities. However, his empire did not last long due to attacks from nomadic peoples of the Zagros Mountains and domestic rebellions. His eldest son, Ishme-Dagan, lost most of the territory, and war spread across the region. City-states like Mari and Babylon allied against Eshnunna and the Elamites, paving the way for the rise of Babylon. Babylon, one of the most famous cities of the ancient world, began as a small village worshipping the agricultural god Marduk. Under its kings, it became a major city. Following the Amorite invasion, Babylon expanded and seized many wealthy cities, such as Kish. Babylon's main rival at this time was Larsa, a city-state worshipping the sun god Utu. However, Larsa held the upper hand thanks to its control over Ur and trade with the Persian Gulf, even defeating the alliance between Uruk and Babylon, led by King Sin-Muballit. In Tisit's Damsto de Vedesiatva Besi, Sine-Muballit's son, Hammurabi, ascended the throne. At this time, Shamshi-Adad still dominated Upper Mesopotamia. While Larsa was strong in the south, Hammurabi spent many years consolidating power, developing the economy, and building the city. When Shamshi-Adad's empire collapsed, Hammurabi exploited the chaotic situation to form an alliance against the Elamites. Although Larsa refused to participate, Hammurabi defeated Elam and subsequently used clever diplomacy to bring down Larsa, unifying the Mesopotamian region under the glory of Babylon. He declared himself the embodiment of the gods. Unlike previous kings who only considered themselves representatives of the gods, Hammurabi's reign was characterized by peace and prosperity until his death. Although subsequent kings failed to preserve his legacy, Hammurabi is still remembered as an ideal ruler, and Babylon continued to be the economic and cultural center of the region for many centuries. After the decline of the Babylonian Empire, the Assyrians in northern Mesopotamia began to rise and build their territory. Prior to this, the Assyrians had been vassals of the Akkadian Empire and had established their own city of Ashur. Under King Ilushuma, the Assyrians conducted several raids around the Mesopotamian region, and over time, Assyria and Babylon gradually formed a rivalry, similar to Athens and Sparta. For a certain period, Babylon held the advantage over the Assyrians. But after the decline of Babylon, the Assyrians found a new opportunity. They maintained peace with neighboring peoples, including the Kassites, who had seized Babylon and established their own dynasty. However, little information is available about the Kassites, except that they were defeated by the Elamites. Meanwhile, the Assyrians, who had briefly succumbed to the Hurrians, eventually overthrew them and entered a period of prosperity. By the 12th century BC, the Bronze Age collapse occurred, severely weakening or even destroying a series of Bronze Age civilizations around the Mediterranean. However, the Assyrian Empire withstood the crisis and gradually restored its power. At the beginning of the first millennium BC, both Babylon and Assyria were attacked by nomadic tribes. But under King Ashur-dan II, the Assyrians organized conquests to reclaim the territory of their ancestors. They devastated rival cities, destroyed statues of gods, and tortured prisoners. Initially, The Assyrians worshipped Ashur as an agricultural god. But as they entered the era of warfare, the image of Ashur transformed into a god of war, worshipped by both Assyrian citizens and their vassals alike. They also adopted many other deities, creating a complex religious system with hundreds of gods. Under King Ashurnasirpal II, whose name means Ashur, is the guardian of the air. The power of the Assyrian Empire reached its peak. The Assyrian army was recognized as the strongest army in the world at that time, equipped with cavalry, Ziga engines, and a standing army. He expanded the territory to the Armenian highlands and forced distant cities to pay tribute. One of his greatest achievements was building many major structures, particularly the library of Ashurnasirpal II and the city of Nimrud, in 879 BC, according to records. He organized a colossal banquet at Kalhu with 70,000 guests, including 16,000 people from the capital and 5,000 foreign guests. During the banquet, they consumed 10,000 pigeons, 000 bear paws, and 10,000 barrels of wine. In addition, King Ashurnasirpal displayed countless treasures of gold, silver, and precious stones to project his wealth and power. His message was clear: he was the greatest king in the world, far surpassing the minor rulers of the West. Building Kalhu at a central location between three major cities helped Ashurnasirpal II manage the empire more easily and limit the power of the traditional aristocratic families. However, after his death, the Assyrian Empire gradually weakened due to nobles vying for power. After years of decline, the Assyrian Empire temporarily stabilized under the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III. He implemented several reforms, built a standing army, reorganized the tribute system, and defeated opposing coalitions. He also applied a policy of mass deportation to control regions at risk of rebellion, while building a communication and espionage system to consolidate power. Under his reign, Assyria conquered Babylon and expanded its territory. However, the Assyrian Empire eventually collapsed at the hands of Nabopolassar, a Chaldean general. He allied with neighboring city-states, defeated Assyria, and sacked the capital Nineveh in 612 BC. Nabopolassar founded the Neo-Babylonian Empire, restoring Babylon to the center of power in Mesopotamia for the first time since the reign of Hammurabi. Under King Nebuchadnezzar II, the Neo-Babylonian Empire reached its peak of power and prosperity. Babylon's scholarship also flourished, with numerous historical records being preserved. However, all of this was destroyed when the Neo-Babylonian Empire was defeated by the Persians in 539 BC, ending its existence after less than a century. Following the fall of the Persian Empire, the Mesopotamian region became part of the Seleucid dynasty of the Greeks, entering the classical period. For a certain period, the Mesopotamians fell under the control of the Roman Empire. But by the medieval period, Islam gradually spread throughout the region, and Mesopotamia officially entered a new chapter in its history.